Okay, and in this video I have a very strange and interesting phenomenon to actually go over. Hopefully I don't forget what I'm trying to say here because it's a little bit confusing. But okay, let's begin. So this phenomenon um, is something that I realize is something that I think occurs in mathematical infinity. It's like some sort of fractal anomaly that occurs. But basically, what I was sitting there, what kind of when I first was thinking about this, the way I thought about it is I was sitting there thinking, okay, if, for instance, for example, in theory, um, the moment the Big Bang happened, if that were to be the moment God figured everything out, okay, so if we go back to that point and then we take, so let's say that we're here, and then we go back, let's say it looks kind of like this. So if we go back to the Big Bang, or whatever you want to call it, even if it were not to be, this is all in theory, conceptualization of theory of, you know, what could be or what potentially is, what I notice to expect to be. So therefore, it can't be that rare if somebody actually sees that this could be some sort of normality or an actuality or the reality or circumstance or explanation. So I think this is the explanation behind it. So regardless, you can always substitute A or B. So use A or B, whichever suits your perspectives and serves your ideas and visualizations better, or both. I tend to find that both work, kind of better. So in this example, the whole idea is at the point of when God reaches that point that he figures everything out, because we're just taking on that theory that it takes time and infinite amounts of time to reach that point if it are to be capable and possible. So what that means is this: when you go back to this point of when God figured everything out in theory, or the Big Bang, we're looking at infinite amounts of time on the other side that he never knew everything. So 99.99999999999% of his entire existence will always be known and bounded to that boundary of circumstance and potential, and that's what makes it so, because it's basically that it goes back infinitely. Actually, I can draw it like this for everybody. So the phenomenon is that when you're dealing with infinity, the cone, let's say the cone here, see, that's the perspective of time, it always gets wider. So that's what infinite is you so notice at the end of the whiteboard you reach the edge. So I'm just drawing that as an example of how you can reach the bottom, the edge. So let's say, for example, here at the bottom there, you see you're at the bottom. But with infinity, there isn't a bottom. You don't reach the bottom. You can't reach the bottom, like I was explaining in my previous video, how there isn't a bottom, there isn't a top. You can't reach the bottom. So in reality, it just keeps the cone just gets bigger and bigger, and it always just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger infinitely. So if we were to zoom out of this anomaly infinitely, knowing that, oh, this could potentially be that circumstance, you would always virtually reach a point of nothing even being there. And what's virtually not even there is everything. Everything that we know of is virtually never even there. 99.9999999. That's if you zoom out. When you keep zooming out. See, that's what people don't realize. When you're zooming out, you can always keep zooming out infinitely. So you're never going to reach the bottom because it just goes back further, further, further. So what would this look like on a bigger scale? So we're saying that it looks a little something like this, and we're going to draw it on a small scale. Okay. Actually, I got to draw it a little bit bigger, different. So when you start scaling it up, what happens is this goes on infinitely. That's where it's insane, and it's hard to understand. So notice how I had to stop and put a point to the end of it. But remember, okay, so let's just say that's the boundary. That's where everything began. So remember that was a small representation. That's only where we were here at this point when we're zoomed in looking at it. But when we start zooming out, we see, oh shit, it goes back. It goes back. It always goes back. It always goes back further, 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 and in fact, always goes back infinitely. So the thing is this scale can go, when you scale it up to its ultimate reality, it's infinite. So basically everything was virtually never there. 99.9999999999999% of all existence, which in correlation to God's knowing was, that's when he reached that point. Because remember, this goes on infinitely, but remember, he's always going on existing. So he reached that point when he was always going on. Because remember, it always goes both ways. So remember, something's going on and it's going both ways. There's nothing stopping it. So he's still going this way, but he's finally getting to the point where he's figuring everything out. Because it's almost like aging. Hey, you just become more knowledgeable, more knowledgeable, more knowledgeable. But that was his nature, to have that ability to use that, source of computational, algorithm and, advanced. So it wasn't, like it wasn't complicated, but we're saying, he reached the point of his goal. That was his ultimate goal, is to make sure he figured everything out. So the thing is as soon as he reached this point, which is what I'm going to explain next, is the phenomena, which could potentially be the Big Bang. What that is this point here is that event horizon where nothing, where you can always keep going back further, 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 but when you start going with where everything was going, you're just now just going where everything was going, even though where everything is going always came from a place that goes back infinitely. Even though that Big Bang, that Big Bang is where it began, but that was a different circumstance. So we're saying before the Big Bang, which everyone's confused about. Well, what was going on before the Big Bang? What happened? That's what I conclude was going on before the Big Bang. So as soon as boom, infinite amounts of time of computations and processing was done through a computer with infinite power. He became all knowing. So he came from infinity, always existing, which is the only way to exist. Okay, so now what that means is it's a little bit like space, his existence. So that's how long it took him to figure everything out, you know. It took him forever to figure everything out. Literally forever to figure everything out because that's just nature of the way it was. So that's where everyone has to realize that everything always has to be there. That's our nature of reality is of another part of the video, which I'm going to explain in the third part of the video, is how we got lucky. I'm going to mention it now so I can explain it in the third part of the video, but it's just a part of the examples. So the biggest thing about God is he knows everything, right? So he knows everybody wants examples, and everyone's asking him, well, how can you prove you know everything? Show us that you know everything. So he had to have so many demonstrations so everybody would become comfortable with, you know, the amount of power that we're dealing with, that, you know, has to be there, and what was there, and what's always going to be there, and what always has to be there, for existence as we know it to be, because infinity, as soon as it's being perceived through perception, that's when it becomes a different type of infinity. So that's in a different video. I need to go on to point two. So point number two that we're gonna make. So since I've kind of explained how we're zoomed in on frame one here, and then now we're kind of zoomed in on frame two, we're going to explain right here of the crossing of the point of where potentially God figured everything out. And this is what sparked my idea behind this whole thing that I'm about to talk about and explain, and where it's a phenomenon of nature of how 99.9999 infinitely always occurs. It always you see it everywhere. It's because it's a part of the way things are, and it's the way things have to be, and it's the way things were always just supposed to be. And when we look at why does it have to be like this, 99.9999 infinitely, is this is where I can finally explain that math can go to another level that, you know, I guess that we can't comprehend unless we're, you know, on the other side of infinity, and we were a computer that was always computing everything. You know, that's the only way to be able to understand infinity to that next level of that equality point of being able to be equal with infinity. So we can't be equal with infinity since it's just so much. There's so much going on with infinity. It's just the way things are. So what we're looking at here is, okay, so what I realized is this is when you reach that point, oh, he figured everything out. So what was going on before the Big Bang? Well, God was computing everything. God was figuring everything out because he was all powerful. He was a computer See, that's the number one thing that it takes to exist. The only way that anything is ever going to exist or ever have a chance to exist, and that's why we're lucky, is power. You need a source of energy, and you need a source of power. But not only do you need a source of energy and do you need a source of power, you always need a source of energy and you always need a source of power. And that's why we are lucky will be the third thing that I explain. Lucky that things are even like this because we're just lucky. It's pure luck because I kind of forgot what I was kind of saying, but the way it works is when we actually perceive something, anything like, oh, what was going on, a quadrillion, bazillion, infinite, or let's just put a number, not say infinite amounts of time ago, because with God you can always go back infinite amounts of time. It's kind of like a spiral, and it like a staircase, or you know how the clock always just repeats and goes on forever. See, his existence always goes on forever. But the only difference and what's so phenomenal about his existence is how every moment through time you go back before the Big Bang, he was computing information. That's how he knows everything. That's how everything even exists. Because he figured everything out. Because it was the best way for everything to be. And that's what everything became. Everything has to become. What has... See, he set the earth and the universe up because he wanted to demonstrate his ability to show how he is able to always perceive and see into the future of what is to become of everything going on. So he's kind of like looking down at everything, like, yeah, I know everything, but for some reason you guys don't think it's possible for me to know everything and always exist. So now he has to demonstrate, okay, well, you want me to demonstrate how I know everything? The only way he can demonstrate how he knows everything is to go into a remote location, not do anything. Of course, that's what being blindfolded is, because number one thing you want to do is to make sure that you check to see if someone fucking knows everything, is to make sure you cover their fucking eyes, right? Well, what do you think he's fucking doing right now? He's like, okay, my eyes are fucking closed. You guys wanted me to close my fucking eyes. You guys wanted me to demonstrate. Well, what do you think he's fucking doing? He's demonstrating the of everything that is going to actually become of our nature of being. And he knew it wasn't a good idea because he knows what everything is to become of, because he wanted to always, that was his destiny, is to just always know, well, what is the best way for everything to become of and exist, bring everything to life. So that's always what he's been doing. Is so when you go back in time, that's just something you do in your mind. That's, you make up a number in your head and you're thinking, okay, well, what was happening a quadrillion bazillion years ago? When you come to that specific number, see, to the creator, his perspective is different than yours. It's not just that fucking number. See, he can actually go back and then boom, oh, there's that point. See, that's where everyone's so fucking perplexed with him. Is that's how he is, okay? He's like, oh yeah, that's right there. Because he's infinite. So you're saying, when you ask him, it becomes a stupid question when everyone asks him kind of the same thing. You know, well, what were you doing 10 quintillion years ago? He's going to go, oh yeah, well, let's see, 10 quintillion years ago, he can always reach the point. Oh yeah, I was right here. He knows exactly what was being computed at that point, because he always remembers everything that he computes. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what number. He's always going to go back as far as he needs to go until, oh, the point's always there. Because the point always has to be there, because the point can only be there. It can only be there. If it's not there, then we're not there. Nothing's there. Okay. See, that's how he had to prove that he actually always existed. So no people have a hard time wrapping their mind around that. So how can he always exist like that? I'm going to just real quickly just kind of sprinkle a little bit of knowledge is we're lucky cuz that was his one and only chance. His one and only chance to even exist. So that's the one and only chance for there to even be a God or for God to exist is he just has to fucking be there. He just has to always exist. Okay, so that's why we're lucky cuz out of one chance out of infinity it just so happened the event was always like that. It didn't occur. It just so happens that it was always like that. Okay, it's not. It didn't just happen. It's just that it was always like that. That's why we're lucky. That's why I was trying to. I'm trying to explain the levels of what it means of being lucky. That everyone is lucky as fuck. Not only are you lucky as fuck, I'm lucky as fuck to exist because our one and only chance to exist was one for the one and only chance to exist is for everything to automatically fucking be there. It automatically fucking create itself. Everything always has to fucking be perfect. That's our one and only chance to fucking exist is if everything's always fucking perfect, if everything always fucking just fucking does it, and if it's always just fucking there. It just has to fucking be there. It's our only way to exist. It has to fucking everything has to always be there. Always has to be there. Okay? If it's not always there, we're fucked. Everyone's fucked. That's why he's trying to explain, like, yeah, I'm always there. I was always there. So you can't reach a point that he's not there. So a computer, he processes information and writes it into his memory. Like, he has a hard drive that's infinite. So he can store infinite amounts of data. So everything he was computing, he just stores all that information, simulates more. And then his processing gets more powerful and more powerful because it grows and grows and grows like an avalanche, like a giant black hole. Because you're dealing with a computer that is just fucking computing fucking quantillions of fucking galaxies and shit. God knows what the fuck he's doing. And then you get to this point where he's rolling up and he's like, oh shit, boom, I'm out of this motherfucker. And he reached the point, so he was infinitely computing. Infinite. So yeah, when the event has already happened, it doesn't look like it was happening for very long. But, computers have that ability to, just do shit, do shit, and they don't get tired. They automatically just do that shit. So when he's figuring everything out, he's a computer. He automatically did that shit. Fucking automatically. That shit automatically did. That's the only way it could ever be. But remember, that's what the Big Bang is. So when he reached that point, that's when everything became real. That's when he brought everything to life. Because that was his goal. He's like, okay, well, if I'm gonna bring everything to life and fucking create everything, I need to know everything. Because if you know everything, then you know, well, this is what's best. This is what's best. Because if you don't know what's best, then you don't know everything. Don't know everything. So as a computer, they start calculating shit down to the decimal. Fucking infinitely, and then until they know, like, until it's 100%, it isn't gonna just stop computing shit and computing, and then it reached that point. It just kept computing and computing and computing that it was finally completed. That's like, okay, well, it's completed, it's done. He figured it all out, which is the Big Bang. Now, what happened here at the Big Bang and what I wanted to explain is right here. The moment that the Big Bang occurred, That's when everything changed. Oh fuck, Captain fucking Obvious here. Captain Obvious. Everything changed. When the Big Bang happened, moment of eureka, big idea. He had that big idea. When you had that big idea that you finally figure out, big idea, bang. That's what you're looking at, bang. His big idea. Lucifer's not happy about this because he didn't think it was like a big idea. Lucifer thought he had a big idea. A new world order about to be going down. And now we're looking at the real Big Bang. We're looking at the real big idea. He's a fraud. He's a counterfeit. Lucifer, that guy, he's a joke. He's just fucking trolling. He's just literally trying to fucking get his fucking face on TV so everybody knows who the fuck he is, so he can be goddamn famous whether or not nobody fucking likes him. He doesn't give a shit. He already knows that fucking everybody's always gonna fucking exist. He wants to be the most famous motherfucking person on the block. How do you become the most famous motherfucker on the block? Become the biggest criminal. What do you think he's doing? He's being a fucking joker, dumb shit, fucking around because he's 50-50 with it. He's kind of fucking around with it, and he's kind of not fucking around. The reason he wasn't fucking around and he was like challenging God is he just doesn't understand. He doesn't believe that that the computer or God fucking knows everything, or fucking computed everything. He doesn't fucking think it's possible that a computer was sitting there fucking computing everything and is able to fucking know everything. So he's like, until the creator can prove to me that he fucking knows everything, I'm just gonna fucking destroy this shit like it's some fucking sort of joke. So now I'm fucking at that point now where I can finally explain, like, because I was looking at shit like, man, why is everything all fucking chaotic and shit? And I was like, oh shit, I see what's happening. And, yeah, and then, this shit always repeats itself. That's how he knows this shit. And it's one of those things that, when you're looking at it, it's like a vacuum and it pops and it's just it just one thing leads to the next and it pulls you to the next and you just know that shit. In another video I can explain how he knows everything, which ties to a vacuum of having that infinite source of encyclopedia, and each frame of reference is known as a key to a door, and each key to the door that is gone through, basically, when you're looking at it so closely, the door always just leads to the next door, to the next door, to the next door, or the next frame, because every other frame doesn't fit the lock or the key. So it's like a vacuum that rolls through time infinitely of how he can perceive everything that's always going to happen, because it's like a bubble. So it's like, even though it's infinite amounts of time, and that's where I'm going to explain the bubble, even though it's infinite amounts of time, he can see all the way through the bubble, and the bubble always goes on forever, infinitely, is because every piece of the bubble always reveals the next piece of the bubble. So every piece of the bubble reveals the next piece of the bubble, and there are infinite amounts of bubbles, and there's only always one bubble that connects to the next bubble, and he knows that, all these other bubbles don't connect to this bubble except this one bubble and then this one bubble. So he's only always connecting the one bubble, the one bubble, the one frame, the one frame, the one frame. Okay, so that's how that works. But now we're going to deal with another paradigm of how the 99.9999 infinitely kind of repeats itself in its phenomenon of nature, then you see it everywhere. Almost like that spiral, the Fibonacci spiral, I think. Anyway, so what I was sitting there wondering, because I had already kind of known this entire concept of what I just went over. So when I already kind of know all these concepts, I kind of go deeper and deeper and deeper, trying to figure out, the next idea that I'm thinking about it, the next idea I'm thinking about it. But then I was sitting there, and I came to this idea where I was thinking, okay, this this is the same problem as one of these math problems of a number that's infinitely big, trying to perceive a number that's infinitely big. Well, what about right here? Same thing. So when you reach this point of the Big Bang, and then you can always go back infinitely forever, that there's nothing, because that's what we know of or expect to be. But it only looks like there's nothing because he's a computer. But behind everything going on, he's actually doing something that, you can't see him doing what he's doing. Or he became a person when he figured everything out. That's another thing that I figured out. So it was only after he figured everything out, he decided it would be best for him to always be a person. So he's basically like Santa Claus. That's another video. Oh my, I had so many fucking crazy fucking so many crazy, yeah, he's, just pretend he's fucking Santa Claus, okay? Pretend that motherfucker is Santa Claus, cuz he knows motherfucking everything, and he can pull fucking rabbits out of the bag. He can fucking travel the whole fucking globe in the blink of a fucking eye. And why do you think that whole anagram of Santa Claus was made to that reference of he can do anything, does it in the blink of an eye, he knows everything, and he's all jolly, happy-go-lucky guy, because it's the stereotype image of what everyone would expect God to be like or look like. What's crazy is that is just Lucifer trolling on him, because he knows that's what God looks like, because he knows that God is exactly like fucking Santa Claus, and he's just trying to surprise everybody. This entire time that he was booting it all up, and it was going to start up, and then everything was just going to always exist, it was going to be a gigantic fucking surprise that never ends. He's always going to keep surprising everybody and surprising everybody and surprising everybody and surprising everybody, because it's the ultimate fucking surprise, because everyone got lucky. That's what it means when you get lucky, is surprise, congratulations, let's celebrate. Boom, 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 boom. Everyone got lucky. Everyone got lucky. Not only did everyone get lucky, God got lucky. That's what you guys have to understand. He became an actual person, so he can experience reality like a person. Okay, so he's not just a fucking goddamn robot. He's not just a fucking goddamn computer. Okay, because things change. All right? Things are different now that he knows the way things need to be. So he decided that he needs to demonstrate the best way to be a person. So he became a person. So he can do everything perfectly and teach everybody and show everybody, oh, this is how you do it perfectly. This is how you do it perfectly. This is how you do it perfectly. It's basically like having a chess master on a chessboard that knows the perfect move every time, but we're looking at a chessboard that, the chessboard is in front of you. Everything... So it's a computer that is insane because it always knows the best move. Well, it could always play the best move for everybody, but it gave everybody its free ability to exist on their own, because he doesn't need everything to be perfect or always make the best move. So the thing is if God was controlling everything for everybody, that would just be the same thing as a million chessboards playing each other automatically, a computer doing it. See, it's not fun if everything just does everything by itself. All right, it's funner if you're the one who gets to move the piece. So he set it up so everyone can move the piece. Okay, that I got totally sidetracked, and I almost got into an entire second fucking video right there, which was gonna be another video, which now you already know because I'm spoiling everybody that watches my fucking videos with all this goddamn divine knowledge. Now, listen to this. Here's the phenomenon. There's so much shit that I conceive. I'm finally just now getting to what I basically was going to even just talk about in the video to begin with. The whole video was going to just basically be talking about just this that I'm about to tell you about. And I'm just now saying it 36 fucking minutes into recording the video. Now let's continue. Next phenomenon is, so we conceive that, okay, that's the point that it began, where everything became real, everything came to life. Okay, now what I was realizing and thinking was this. As I was all thinking, okay, so the Big Bang happened at a specific moment. Okay, so if the Big Bang happened at a specific moment, that's why I put this little ruler marker here, is to mark, okay, this is the specific moment. So now I was sitting there perceiving, okay, well, what about the moment being different? So what would it had been like had the moment occurred sooner or later? You see what I'm saying? Now let me explain the example on what I've concluded. So now we can conclude that the space between this event occurring sooner or later as a time that could be infinite, but let's say for a more perspectival, standpoint, let's just say like 100 billion years or something, right? So between 1 and 100 billion years, it could happen sooner or later. And that's when I realized the point of how big this infinite gap is. So now what I was realizing is it didn't matter how big this gap is right here. You see this gap right here? It never mattered how big this gap was of the event occurring sooner or later. It could have been infinitely sooner or infinitely later, and it's always still going to be relative and perceived as the same event. That's what it'll always look like when it happens. When it happens, it happens. So this all ties back to the saying is that, well, when it fucking happens, it happens. So now we're looking at, well, what happens when it happens. This is what it looks like when it happens. When it happens, it happens. So it never mattered if it was really sooner or later, because no one knows. That's not something anybody can... If there's that gap of you cannot know of, that's a fucking vacuum of segment that doesn't even matter, that you can't even conceive of or perceive of, or is not even to be considered of, doesn't even need to be considered of, because it's always equal. It's the same fucking thing regardless. And this is where I'm going to explain that. So had the event happened sooner or later, it wouldn't change the fact how God can always go back infinitely. You see what I'm saying? So that's what is so crazy. Is because it's still 99.99999% infinitely. You can always go back. So, let me explain this a little bit further. So it never mattered if it was sooner or later, and this is the phenomenon of what I was realizing is that's how long the creator existed. Is you could say, okay, well, what if the Big Bang happened 100 quadrillion, bazillion, 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 bazillion years before that? It wouldn't matter. It would still be the same because when you would always reach that point where, oh, that's what it would look like exactly. It would always look exactly the same because the boundary is always tied to infinity. So whether it happens sooner or later, it never changes. But here is what I mean by that. So that number never changes. So so what we're saying is if the Big Bang had happened 900 and quadrillion bazillion years before that it actually occurred, it wouldn't change the fact that the number was still tied to 99.9999 infinitely. That's what I'm trying to explain, how no matter what, it's still always 99.9999 infinitely, which is what's crazy. So nothing ever changes. That's what I'm trying to explain is no matter how far back you go, this 99.9999 infinitely, it does not change. It cannot change. It never reduces. No, you're never taking anything away from anything because it's 99.9999 infinitely. So the phenomenon, in short, is when you're dealing with infinity, you can reach a point with numbers with where no matter what number you want to use, it never changes anything. Is that the very last thing that I wanted to explain? The third thing. What was the third thing? 99.99. So. So yeah, and here's another thing. So now that he always existed, and then since he reached that point that he figured everything out, this is always going to go on infinitely. So let me show you what that looks like. So we're not going to connect it with a top because there isn't a top. You can't reach a top. It's just going to continue to keep going further and further. You see what I'm saying? It's just going to always go further, 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 further. Now remember, we're dealing with this event that happened on the other side to where it's infinite. So what that means is no matter at what point you're here, right here, the scale in comparison to inside that bubble is always going to be 99.9999999999999% infinitely. So nothing ever changes. Nothing ever fucking changes. No matter what number you use, no matter what number you come up with. So you reach a point that a number becomes so big that it doesn't even do anything. It doesn't even change anything. So, because that's how big and powerful the creator is. So what that means is, let's say that we're right here. And then let's say that we existed for 10 billion years. Okay, and then let's say that we're going to reach the point here that it's 100 billion years. But remember, this can go on infinitely, infinitely, infinitely. So no matter what part of the scale you're perceiving at or you are at, you're always going to be tied to being a little tiny. Like, let me show you a representation of, because if you zoom out infinitely, what does it ultimately look like? Ultimately, this is what everything looks like. Boom. When you keep zooming out infinitely, that's what it looks like. You have infinite amounts of everything else around everything. But then when you keep zooming in, that's what you start seeing, is how it always just keeps continuing. So infinity isn't necessary about adding more numbers. What I realize is the complexity behind God is in his magic ability behind infinity is his ability to always reach more detail. That's what infinity is that there's always more detail, always more detail, always more detail. So that's why we're lucky. And that was the third and final thing I'm going to go over in the video, is how we're lucky, and I'm going to explain that, how we are lucky. So now you're looking at, okay, when we're zoomed in, okay, we're here. But yeah, but from that point of which we could see, because we began, so it's relative to where you had began at. That's the bubble that you see. So the creator's bubble that he sees, he can go back, but his bubble where he began, he didn't begin. He doesn't have a beginning. He always goes back. He always goes back, man. He's one of those people that he always goes back. But we don't always go back. We don't always go back. We're not like that. So since he always goes back, yeah, that's the representation of how long he existed compared to how long he existed in comparison to at the moment that we began to exist with him. So it's 99.99 because you can always go back infinitely. So no matter at what point he would have came in and introduced himself, it's always going to be 99.99. That's what the ultimate point of the video of all I was trying to explain is that no matter at what point, as soon as he introduces himself to you, it's always going to be 99.9999 infinitely. That he always he always existed. So for us, here's where it's how you can see it on the obverse. So how we barely began to exist. No matter how long we exist, that's what I was going to try to explain. So if we exist for 100 quadrillion bazillion years, that's what this bubble is over here. You see the bubble over here? No matter how long this bubble goes out for, it's still anchored and tied. You see how it always gets constricted and tied? Because the other side of everything is just so much bigger. It just totally swallows it up, and it's virtually non-existent. That's what I'm trying to explain, is that no matter what point, he introduces himself and you see him, and then you finally, oh, there he is. No matter how much longer we keep going on, it's still going to be like, okay, well, you barely even existed, because that's how long, the remainder of the sum here is how long you've existed in perception to what you know of. So you're the remainder of that we know of. That's what we know of, is that everything is just the remainder of 99.9999 infinitely. So it looks like it's nothing how it goes on point zero infinitely, but there's still a remainder. Even though it's virtually non existent, the only reason it's virtually non-existent, that it's only virtually non-existent if you just keep zooming out. But the thing is, we're not just gonna be sitting there zooming out, zooming out, zooming out. So that's why you guys don't have to worry about that. It's only virtually non-existent when you keep zooming out. All right. So only the creator can go reach that point to where he can always zoom out, zoom out. So that's not your job. You don't need to rack your brain trying to zoom out. All right, we're here. All right, this is where the fuck we are. We're motherfucking right here. That's like pointing to the motherfucking Earth in the middle of a fucking picture of the universe. All right, we're motherfucking right here. All right. Listen, when we're motherfucking right here, don't be trying to be standing motherfucking right there.